The sun has left and forgotten me. It's dark, I cannot see.
Your stories don't define you, but how you tell them will. Hi, I'm Sarah Elkins, your host and chief storymaker at Elkins Consulting. I call myself a chief storymaker because I realized over the years that a lot of the stories I tell are from daily interactions, daily moments in time that may not look like a story outwardly, but they shape who I am and how I experience myself, which then, of course, in turn, shapes how other people experience me. So I call myself a story maker because now, over the years, I've learned to be really intentional about those actions, about those interactions, so that I'm making the stories that I can be proud to share. Today's episode is featuring my friend, I want to make sure I pronounce this right, Lana McAra. Okay, excellent. And we met, I think, through LinkedIn. Oh, a funny random introduction that a mutual friend on LinkedIn suggested that we meet because we both live in Florida, but it was a different Sarah Elkins that she was referring to. But Lana and I decided that there's always a reason for everything. Connections don't happen by accident. So we connected anyway, even though I'm in Montana and she's in Florida. And when we had our first conversation, I knew she would make a great guest on this podcast. This is a woman that listens in an intentional way so that she can bring out the best in the writers that she works with. And I've talked with some really good publishers and editors and people who do book publishing. But when you find somebody who listens and can draw out meaning behind things that other people might miss, you know this is somebody you want to work with. So, Lana, thank you so much for joining me on Your Stories Don't Define You, How You Tell Them Will.
Sarah, what a pleasure. And the way we met makes it all the more special.
It does. It really does. And I will remember who it was that did that for us shortly. Leslie
Caps?
Leslie Capps, that's who it was. Menopause brain. I just don't remember anything these days. So I'm really impressed with myself right now. Leslie Capps. So I mentioned that I love to start these conversations by asking my guests to share a story about themselves that something about themselves that most people don't know about them, that they wouldn't find on their LinkedIn profile or their resume or their bio. And I do this because I'm finding more and more that we tend to judge people in an instant, even more than in the past, based on one brief interaction, one Facebook post, one comment on LinkedIn. We anchor people in time in that part of their identity. And we so rarely acknowledge the complexity that is behind every interaction. We say that you can't walk a mile in that person's shoes, you don't know what they're going through. But then when it comes right down to it, the judgment happens instantly on social media. You are one of those people. And by sharing something about yourself that most people don't know about you, we are opening the door for our listeners to truly understand the complexity behind this human being. So what do you think? Do you have something you can share with us?
Oh, my difficulty is in choosing which one. Most people don't know that I am from the Amish community. If you don't know who the Amish are, they are a group of people, a subculture in the United States of people that live in the past. They drive horses and buggies without owning cars, no modern conveniences, no electric. They dress in old-fashioned clothing like the 1800s, and they have very close-knit families. So my parents were both Amish, but they weren't Amish when I was born. They had both left the Amish before they married. And so when they married, they were no longer Amish, but we lived in the Amish community, and the relatives, would come to see us from time to time, and they were Amish. And my parents would be speaking their version of German to them.
So Pennsylvania
It
or
was Delaware.
Delaware?
Yes. And so we are not now this is part of the culture. There's Pennsylvania Amish and there's Ohio Amish. And Delaware is a transplant from the Ohio group, not the Pennsylvania group. So the Delaware group would be very offended if someone said,
Pennsylvania Amish? Pennsylvania
"Are you
Dutch?
Pennsylvania Amish?"
Right.
Yeah, they would say, "Oh no."
We're not those people.
Right. And they don't even intermarry. You know, you would think that an Amish man from this group in Delaware would be able to go to Pennsylvania and find a wife. No, they do not. They do not mix.
Wow.
So, yeah. Yeah.
We have Hutterites here in Montana, and it's a very similar culture.
Mhm.
They do have a truck because they are farmers here, and they bring them to the farmers market, and they have to transport their agriculture. And I remember visiting my parents' families in Delaware because they both grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, and we would have Amish foods, Amish pretzels, but they were Pennsylvania Dutch as
Yes.
the different ones that I remember. I don't remember meeting Ohio Amish. That is fascinating. How do you think that has influenced your approach to community? Because I think about my approach to community is really strongly influenced by the fact that I went to 4 different elementary schools. We moved around a lot, not military. It was kind of a random reason to move around. And so my approach to community is really build it wherever you are. How do you think yours has been influenced by that?
Well, that's interesting because, well, we were not part of the Amish, and therefore we did not have that close-knit feeling. We were more on the outside, and I've never really had that kind of community feeling. Although you might assume it, that didn't ever happen for me. And so I felt very isolated a lot of my life. And when I married a pastor, and I felt even more isolated because pastors' wives can't spill the beans with church people. And I might have some girlfriends in the church, but I couldn't share my personal life with them. And the only friends I had were in the church. So there wasn't a lot of opportunity for me to really let my hair down with people. I loved them and I'd be friendly with them, but not intimate conversations. Right. Yeah. And I think that has kind of defined my professional image as being a professional person that doesn't really let my hair down a lot. That even holds with me today. And I divorced my ex-husband 16 years ago. It's been a long time, but I still have that feeling. Now there are a few friends I do have where I feel I can be totally, open and let down. But yeah, that's something that I've actually had to put down, just let that go and be more of who I authentically am.
I hear you. And I wonder if that's part of why you're so good at pulling the important vulnerabilities from your authors that you work with. Is because you're not associating it with your own vulnerabilities. You have that separation because you don't allow a connection where you're sharing as much as they are. Wonder if that's why you're so good at that.
That's an interesting question, because I have learned And I think this is part of the ministry thing, because I was married to him for 30
Wow.
years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, from the time I was 21 till I was 51. So, most of my adult life, I I learned to tune in. And I think I call it tuning in because people have kind of a wavelength that they're on. And if I sit quietly with them for a few minutes, I can sort of tune in to where they're coming from. And through this active listening that I've learned to do over the years, then I can hear them at that deeper level, what's going on behind the words, the emotion behind it. And through gentle questions, open up those areas, especially because I'm a ghostwriter and I've written, I don't know how many, 6 or 8 prescriptive memoirs for people. And so when I'm sitting there and they're talking about their life story and I'm looking for the threads, I'm looking for the lessons and the insights that would be in their story. And that's part of it, too. Yeah.
And finding the connections among them that this led to this. That's part of why I asked you the question about how do you think growing up on the outskirts of an Amish community influenced how you behave now? Is that thread is so important for us to understand, especially if we choose to change something and knowing where it came from and being intentional about it. Okay, I know where it came from. I'm satisfied. I don't want to change it. Like just being intentional about it, conscious. So when you mentioned that you get on this wavelength, you get in there and pull those threads. Have you ever worked with somebody that didn't work because they needed a different kind of coach for it?
I'm going to say no, but there's a reason for that. And that is when I first meet a potential client, I'm looking for that connection before I will accept them as my client, because I know that the level of work that I do requires that understanding and communication level. If I can't tap into them and I feel shut out for some reason, I remember someone that was doing a business book and he was very anxious for me to work with him. And we had a call and he was really forceful. And, the energy was pushing
Aggressive.
out. It wasn't a give and take. It
Right.
was
It was
more like
aggressive.
aggressive pushing energy. And I remember so well, I needed the work. And I was thinking, am I going to be able to really do this with this person? And I couldn't. I couldn't do it. I need that rapport. And that comes over in my podcast as well. I need that rapport in order to co-create whatever it is that we're doing, whether it's a podcast or a book or editing or whatever it might be, publishing.
A few things just popped into my head when you said that, when you told that story. First of all, I remembered the first time I had to fire a client because he was aggressively dismissing my guidance. I was like, you hired me. So I remember that first time. And I needed the money. It was early in my business. But I knew that my reputation was at stake. And if I continued to go with this gut feeling, I knew that neither of us would end this satisfied. So I had to refer him to some of my peers. That's the first thing that came up. And then I was thinking about how different you and I are in our approach to this, and how important it is to have a variety in our lives. The people who want to work with me are the ones that want to that may not know what their stories are. And my approach is to share a brief story of my own to unlock their story. And they'll say, oh, yeah, now I know what you mean. I do have an experience like that, so that I can pull the threads. And I used to be really envious of the coaches that could ask question after question after question and draw it out of them. And that is not how I do it. I'm not that coach. I definitely ask a ton of questions, but it's a really different approach. So I loved hearing that, how you do this, because the level of vulnerability is so different between how you do it and how I do it. The other thing that I loved about it was when you talked about co-creating and the fact that your work, the work you do, is all about co-creating. Tell me more about that.
Wow. Yes, it is co-creation, because I see myself as a support system for whatever author I'm working for. It's their work, but I'm bringing my expertise and therefore my insights as well. And so we have this dance where they bring their material, whatever it may be. It could be some articles they have, or a course they've done, or maybe it's a manuscript, but they have something. And then we'll talk about it. Then I'll take it and I'll do my work with it. And then I give it back to them. Then they look at it and they bring me their response and we talk about it. And this is magic to me. I love it because we are flowing together in this creative space, and it's really fulfilling and fun to see what's going to come out between what they put in and what I put in, and how it all works out in the end. And I feel like I just have such a privilege to work in that kind of magical space. It's creativity is intoxicating to me.
Agreed. I love that explanation. And it's so different from what most of us experience in our work. We are generally evaluated by what we bring to the table, not what we co-create with other people.
Mm.
That's why when you were talking about co-creating, it just really caught my attention.
That's the first time I've heard it said that way. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Well, and I'm a big believer in creativity in all aspects of our lives and finding opportunities to be creative. A lot of people I have worked with in the past have said, oh, I'm not creative. And I just roll my eyes. Of course you're creative. Even if you're an accountant, you find ways to be creative in bookkeeping. And I don't mean, illegally, but finding ways to acknowledge, maybe it's illegally, but finding ways to acknowledge the different kinds of categories that a company might have and how they need to collect their data and what this looks like in the context of accounts payable, accounts receivable. That takes some creativity. It's not my style of creativity, but it is creative. So I love that. I love this idea of the co-creating. So let's, so that you are telling us what you do without telling us what you do, which has been kind of happening all along for this conversation. Before I hit record, I asked you to tell me something that made you smile recently, and you were talking about a client you recently worked with. Can you tell that story again? Because I think our listeners will appreciate it, and they'll understand, based on the story, what it is you really do as your income-producing activity at business.
Oh, yeah, I would love to tell that story again. This just happened today. I had the final phone call. I had a new client who came in as a referral from someone else, and I had talked to him a few months back, and what he needed at that point was not something that I could really help him with, but he came back with something in addition. And at first he was very kind of gruff and didn't listen to me. He would ask me questions, not allow me to answer. And I'm kind of scattered. And this man he's older. He's nearly 80 years old. He's got a doctorate and he's been in the academic world for many years. And so he really thinks on a different plane than what I would consider myself to think on. Philosophical and very deep thinker. And so, yeah, I took on the project. It was one of those things where you tap in, should I take this? And I got a big yes. And so we've been working together now for, I guess, about 6 or 8 weeks. And today's call, he was talking to me about where do I go from here and where am I going to take this project? And he said to me, there aren't very many people that I can talk to about this because they just don't understand me except for you. And that touched my heart so much. It really touched my heart. Because through that process where I could reflect back to him, he would say something and I would reflect back to him.
This is what I heard, right?
Yes, this is what I heard. Am I getting this correct? And I would say it, in simpler terms. And he suddenly keyed in on the fact that I was listening to him. And I think the listening piece is really what flipped the switch in the way we were interacting. He realized that I was actively listening to him and seeking to understand. And I was able to understand then, eventually what he was getting at. And it became very sweet, a very sweet collaboration on his project. And I'm really looking forward to seeing where he goes with it now that our work is done.
I have such mixed feelings about that story. It makes me feel so good and heartfelt and warm that he found this person that's listening to him, that understands what he brings and how important his message could be. And then the other half of me is thinking, how sad that so many people in our lives don't ever feel that sense of somebody is really listening to me. Someone really gets me. Or it's so rare. The fact that it feels so rare.
Oh, yes. I definitely felt that as well. And I think one of my big life lessons back in the day when I was raising a family and I was, pastor's wife and all that, I was so busy that I was always on edge, always rushing. I rushed from morning to night. And I can remember sitting at the red light fuming because this is costing me minutes that I need to get there and get my stuff done. And somewhere along the line, as I'm going through my own personal growth and development after the divorce, I realized that life is lived in between. Life is lived in the moments in between the big events. It's the sitting at the red light. It's the finishing your dinner in a very calm and peaceful way, not just stuffing your mouth and rushing to the dishwasher. It's those moments when life is really, really happening. And I think the understanding that we're missing half of what we have available just because we're in too much of a hurry. And so slowing down, I think, is a huge piece of my own life lesson for connecting with people. And, isn't listening part of the slowdown? I think it really
Absolutely.
is. Yeah.
It is. That's something I continue to work on. I just never feel like I am there. I have moments where I feel like I'm being a really good listener. Then I'll go, into a conversation, walk out just kicking myself because I feel like I wasn't fully present. So I love this idea that having that relationship with this client helped you also reiterate or confirm this passion for slowing down. That's what I'm hearing from that. And I also love that it also feels to me like you feel confirmation that your work is really meaningful when you have a moment like that.
Oh, absolutely. That's what keeps me going. It's those moments. And sometimes I have previous clients call me up to tell me about some win they've had or something that they feel I would relate to. And, to hear the joy in their voice and the feeling of connection that we have on the phone together, it's really what makes my life worthwhile. I mean, the money's nice, you have to earn a living, but I think that's really where where, as the kids say, where the juice is.
Well, the other thing that you said reminded me of the very first part of this conversation when I was introducing the podcast and said, be a story maker. Pay attention to those moments. If you're not present, you're missing out on the most meaningful moments if you're rushing from one thing to the next. So you have children then?
Yes, I do. I have 7 children.
7 children. Wow. Well, then this question might be a little different for you than it would have been for anyone else. I remember when our boys were little, I loved getting in the car with them because they'd be in the car seats in the back. And that's when they would talk to me most because they couldn't see my face. They couldn't see my expression. And even as they got older, when I felt like they needed to tell me something, but they were holding back in some way, and we had lots of other adults in their lives that they felt safe to talk to. My siblings, my husband's siblings, the neighbors. I mean, we were very fortunate to have a solid community of adults around them. But what I remember is I would say, let's go for a hike. And we'd go on a single track hike behind our house, knowing that if they were walking in front of me, they would talk. Or if they were walking behind me and couldn't see my face, they would talk. And that's where I had that moment of rushing around. It wasn't at a red light. It was, oh, they're talking to me. I need to be fully present. I'm driving, but I have to be fully present, listen to what they're saying, because they never would have said this if we were face to face. So when you think back on that time with your children and that realization that I'm freaking out about a red light, which I have no control over, I'm sure that was part of the thought was, wait a minute, I can't control a red light, right? Like, why am I so upset? Do you have other moments like that, particularly as you're raising children, that you had that wherewithal to slow down? Because it's hard. It's hard with 2 kids. It's hard with 1 kid. I can't even imagine 7. How do you have a relationship with every single one of them? What are your thoughts about that? Because I'm asking you this because I am 100% sure that those experiences inform how you behave with your clients and with your chosen community that you have now in your life.
Oh, yes. Yes. Thank you for drawing that out because I never really thought of it that way before, which I love the conversations with you, Sarah, because you bring new things that, are so amazing.
Well, maybe I'll help you write your book.
That would be interesting. I feel like I need help. I'm so busy these days. Getting my own work done is a challenge. So I homeschooled my 7 children for 25 years, and I would create projects for us. So one year we had stacks and stacks of Christmas cards from church people. Every Christmas we'd get all these stacks and stacks of Christmas cards. Well, I put them in a box. And one year I got out some poster board and cut placemats. I traced a placemat on the poster board. And then we made decoupage Christmas placemats by cutting up the Christmas cards and decoupaging them onto the poster board. And those were the kind of projects I absolutely loved doing with my children, because while they were cutting, while they were pasting, all this conversation is happening. And everyone is sitting there relaxed, and we're just in the moment enjoying the craft. And it was magical. It
Did you
was
find,
magical.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Did you find that because they were busy and they were doing something that they wanted to be doing, that there was less bickering?
Oh, yes. Yes, there was no bickering. And then they would become, remembering things that happened, or asking questions about something that was on their mind, or we had these wonderful, fun conversations over this kind of project. And then when the project was over, I'd put clear contact paper on top of the cards, and we used those for many years. And what memories were packed away in that.
I love that. Do you still have them, or did one of your children inherit the collection, or did they just wear them out completely?
Yeah, they went
They
all
wore
they
out.
all yeah.
It was 7 kids eating on them for 20 something years. Yeah, I can
Yeah.
imagine. Oh, I love that. Okay, I'm going to bring in one more little thing before we kind of turn around and find our way back to the beginning. I often think of a podcast episode I recorded with a woman named Lisa Weiss, and she has a podcast called The Object Diaries. And it's all about these sacred objects that have this meaning that we don't realize, or that other people would never know that what you have on your desk or in your home is a meaningful object to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so she talks about a cigar box, I think it was a cigar box filled with her father's toys, little trinket toys that he would show her regularly. And this is the car I got and this is the whatever. And when I think about those placemats, I realize you don't have to still have the object for it to have meaning. You don't have to replace it if it's gone. So when you think about it in that context, 2 questions, and I may have to come back because, menopause, I'll forget that I asked you 2 questions. First question is, what is an object that you treasure, whether you have it still or not? And can you see yourself using this exercise with your clients at some point, or have you unknowingly pulled a thread based on an object that a person talked about but didn't pull the thread themselves?
Mm.
But we'll start with your own, and we'll have to do a shout out to Lisa Weiss. She's a phenomenal human being. I just love her. It's brilliant.
My oldest granddaughter was very special to me because she was the only grandchild for 4 years or so. And so between the time that she was born until she was 4, we didn't live in the same town, but I would go and see her. And I called it going and see her, not going to see my son's family.
Right.
Going
Of
to see
course.
her.
Yeah, baby. Right.
And we would play. And we would paint, and we would go to the park, and it was just wonderful time for me to get in touch with my inner child, because I was able to play with her. And we went to the beach. Now, this was later when she already had a little sister, but I lived in Delaware, and there was a beach near my house. It wasn't a sandy beach, it was a rocky beach. And I would go down there just to feel the ocean breeze, and you couldn't really go in the water. But the girls were there, and they were picking up stones and shells and having a wonderful time. And my oldest granddaughter brought me this oddly shaped rock. It was rectangular, but one end was narrow and the other end was fat. And so it was kind of weird looking gray rock. It was just a gray rock.
It's just a rock, right? We had a lot of rocks in our house when our boys were little.
She handed it to me and she went off, to get some more, whatever. And I kept that rock, and it's in the console in my Subaru today. When I'm driving, there's that little rock.
And how long ago was this?
Oh my gosh, at least I think 10 years ago.
So she was around 14 now.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. I love that. She's going to hear this recording someday. Maybe not soon, but someday she'll be like, oh my gosh, she still had that rock.
Yeah.
I love that. And Lisa would appreciate hearing that story too. Because I think we all have those things, right? Like I have an ornament hanging from my rearview mirror in my car that has been through 3 different cars. And it was a 40th birthday present from my son's best friend. And it has a black onyx wolf at the bottom. And he said, and I saw this and I thought of you and how fierce you are and how you take care of everybody. This is my son's best friend in probably middle school.
Yeah.
I still have it. It goes from car to car with me. Treasure it. And it's not even from one of my own kids. So I love that you have that. So that other half of the question was, now that you look back at all of the ghost writing that you've done, particular with memoir,
Mm-hmm.
is there an object that comes to mind from one of those projects that you're like, oh, that's something we talked about in the book, or anything like that? Is anything popping for you?
Mm.
It could be a mountain. It could be a chair. It could be a rocking chair. Like the reason I'm asking this is that when I teach storytelling, I remind people that you have to have other characters in your story. And many people will know, they will recognize that oftentimes the other character in my story is the mountain I hike on every day in Montana, or my dog. Right? So that's why I'm asking. I'm sure you have done this, but maybe you haven't associated it quite like that.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank right now because I've ghostwritten 22 books. And so I'm thinking, who do I want to go after?
But you'll have to come back to it.
Yeah.
And when you do your own memoir, whatever you end up writing for yourself, maybe that's something you'll use, is you'll be able to represent a whole story based on one object as part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are just masterful at that.
Yes.
Building a story around an object, a sacred object.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I love those stories.
I love it. So before we wrap up, I would love for you to tell our listeners a little bit about the services you provide, because I'm sure that now they're curious. They want to know, how do I work with this woman? Or, so what does she actually do? I get that a lot when I'm introduced from friends. They're like, so this is my friend Sarah. She has a podcast and she does a StrengthsFinder thing. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not what I do.
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking me that question, opening that door. I am a full-time ghostwriter. I ghostwrite books. There's different kinds of ghostwriters. I ghostwrite full-length books for people, and they can be around spiritual topics or memoir. I've written books for 2 medical doctors, books on leadership and business. So a wide variety of topics. I've ghostwritten 2 novels as well.
That's fun.
My own writing is fiction, and I teach fiction. I have a course in fiction and teach other people how to write fiction. I have a class at the local library once a month teaching fiction, and it's been very successful. So I've developed a community here in Northern Florida of writers, and it's been a phenomenal experience being here. Florida is rich with writers, so many writers here. I also am a book coach, which means you write the book and I'll give you advice, or I'm also an editor and and developmental editor. And then I also am a publisher. I have a publishing company that is a traditional publisher, but we do it a different way, where the author keeps all the rights, they keep creative control, and still get the wide distribution and support that you would expect from a traditional publisher. So that is, that's me in a nutshell. I don't know which hat I'm going to wear which day. Some days I block out all my calendar so I can edit or ghostwrite whatever I'm doing. And other days I'm doing podcast episodes. I have a podcast called In the Writer's Chair. So I try to batch my activities so I'm not too scattered. I want to focus. This day is going to be podcast, and this day is going to be editing or whatever it might be. So yeah, that's a very full life, but I truly love what I do. And someone said to me recently, I was in a conversation with a couple of people on a Zoom call, and this guy said, "You're so lucky that you get to work at home and do this stuff." And I said, "Luck has nothing to do with it. I consciously created my life. I love it because it's mine. I made it."
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, agreed. I get that a lot. You're so lucky to be doing what you love. And I'm like, that's not luck. I tried a lot of different frogs before I found my career prince. And it took me well into my 50s to get to where I am professionally. Yeah, it's not luck. We craft our lives to fit our needs if we're conscious about it. Wow. And that doesn't mean we have to be self-employed to do it either. I know people who may not be as passionate about their jobs, but they have their jobs so that they can have a life outside of work. And so I'm a big fan of really thinking about, what does success look like for me? Is it monetary? And at one time, maybe that would have been part of my definition. But at this point, I have my needs met. No, I have, the one thing I get concerned about is the potential for dramatic diagnosis or whatever that really, that's when not having your needs met includes medical stuff. But I love that was your answer. No, it took a lot of work to get here. It's not luck at all. So for our listeners, I don't know if anybody else will be curious about this, but for me, when I heard that you have ghostwritten a couple of novels, what I'm imagining is somebody has an idea. They have the characters in their head, they have the plot in their head, but they just aren't a writer necessarily, but they're incredibly creative, have all these ideas. They know what it could be. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Exactly. One of the books, the man had been working on his manuscript for 5 years. He had wonderful ideas, and he had some stuff written. It wasn't good at all. I mean, I didn't use any of it. I started over because it just, and he was a very busy lawyer. So he had no time. And I said to him, I could coach you and you could learn how to do this. And he said, I have no time at all. So let's go ahead and let you write it. And so that was a definite co-creation project where it was his characters, his story, and I would take his material. He mailed me a box full of research books that he had purchased.
Oh, wow. I guess when you have the money to throw at the idea, you hire somebody to do it for you. Like, I love that because you're really good at it. And why Why should he learn this when his expertise is the story, the creative idea, the character development? Why not hire somebody else whose specialty is actually writing it and creating the structure for it? Oh, love that. That's brilliant. That's
It
brilliant.
was one of my favorite projects ever.
I bet it was. I bet it was. Wow, that's really helpful because that was the first thing I thought of when you said you've co-written or ghostwritten novels. Oh, that's great. Well, listeners, I am guessing that you are going to have questions for Lana. And just so you know, all of her information, contact information, everything that you would want to follow in her work is in the show notes on the podcast page of my website, elkinsconsulting.com, under this podcast episode. So keep an eye out and go to the website, elkinsconsulting.com, the podcast page, and you'll see all of her links, and you can follow, get connected, maybe join one of her communities of writers. Most of us writers don't do it alone. I mean, I'm sure there are some lone wolves that just do the whole thing themselves, but I would say that every author that I know, and I know a lot, they require a community to write a book. So don't try to do it alone. Or as Lana would say, you're missing out on the opportunity to co-create something, to strengthen your relationships with the people around you, to build something in a way that feels like compassion. It feels like listening. Wow. Lana, thank you so much for joining me today. Is there anything that you would like to add that maybe something that you would like the listeners to hear from our conversation? Anything that stood out to you from our conversation? Any aha moments?
Just one short one, and that is slow down and listen.
I need to own that one. Slow down and listen. Lana, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast.
Thank you.
Listeners, now it's your turn. What did you get from this conversation? Maybe you're going to go look for the Object Diaries episodes and meet Lisa Weiss. Maybe you're going to pick out your object that becomes the focal point of a story. Maybe you realize that you have a great story in you and you just need a little help to craft it, and you now have a resource to help you with that. I'd love to hear your thoughts after you listen to this episode. Send me a message, go to elkinsconsulting.com, or send me a message on LinkedIn or Instagram. Thank you so much for listening to Your Stories Don't Define You, How You Tell Them Will.
You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile.